Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Obsatz, and I'm Professor Emeritus from Macalester College in St. Paul. And I've been a workshop leader, a men's group leader, an author, a filmmaker. I've done talking all over the country. And what we're going to talk about today is emotional wounds that we carry and how we can heal these wounds through a spiritual transformation. I'll also include briefly about an emotional and psychological transformation, but this is going to focus on the other kind of transformation, which happens by people becoming spiritually connected. So when we're born, we're innocent, we are in touch with our true nature, and we know we are lovable, loved, and loving. We know that. We know that somewhere deep inside. But then we're thrown into a world with family, culture, society, and as we live in the world, we are exposed to what I call empire culture, which is empire consciousness, which is a hierarchical way of looking at things where we're not enough, we have to dominate, we're either at the top or in the middle or at the bottom. It's about power and control. It's about fear. It's about scarcity. It's about loss. It's a culture of shame and results in addiction, defenses, depression, loneliness, and self-doubt. So the wounds that come to us can come from family members. They can come from friends and peers. They can come from being in school. Most people, when they're exposed to regular schooling, get a heavy dose of what I call empire cultural brainwashing, which is based on hierarchy and power and control. So as a result of this, we begin to make up stories like, I must be unlovable. I am not going to survive. I am bad, they all hate me. And then there is the grief of loss of the authentic self. I am sad, I am mad, and I am scared. And so from that innocence and lovability at birth, we can move quickly in the first couple of years into a feeling of lack of worthiness, not feeling lovable. And what happens to people as they go through this process is they start defining themselves by the wound that they have. And it becomes very narcissistic because when you're hurting, it can be all about you. I am alone. I am suffering. No one cares. I am empty. I am unlovable. And that woundedness then feeds the empire and feeds the empire consciousness. And it just perpetuates itself in so many different ways. This is a very spiritually disconnected way to be, and is very much a part of a competitive society. There is very often what happens, a psychological intervention, where people are tired of being wounded and in pain and suffering and feeling shame all the time. And they do some psychological work, which is really can be very helpful. They learn to feel the pain, they acknowledge the wound and the hurt, and then they learn about the patterns, defenses, and ways that they learn to cope as a result of the wound. This is trauma work for some people. It is shame work for other people. It is a way of trying to undo the cultural suffering that it was imposed on the beautiful child that you were at birth. So this creates a kind of possibility for healing. And there can be forgiveness work, there can be ways of transforming the negativity of the woundedness to something positive. But what happens to people sometimes, is they start feeling unworthy and unlovable because of the wound. So, since I was hurt, I am an unworthy person, or I would not have been hurt. And that's not true, but that's what some people believe. You can look at your defenses, and you can look at patterns, and you can look at them as, boy, they were dysfunctional. Another way of looking at them is they saved you maybe from being in a toxic situation that you might have grown up in. All people have suffered abandonment, abuse, neglect, and hurt, but some have had it to greater extremes than other people. So there's a return to the narcissistic self it's about me. And what needs to change spiritually is there needs to be a spiritual intervention. So it's not just about me, it's about what happened to me, and I am not that person that they said I was. I am still lovable, loved, and loving. And then it becomes a spiritual connection with God, Spirit, or the universe that helps a person revive and get over the definition of themselves as the woundedness that they have. Some people stay worshiping their wound and defining themselves by their wound. Other people are able to spiritually connect and realize that they are not their wound, that it was not really about them, that the suffering that they went through happened to be because they were the ones who were there, but it wasn't really anything about them. It was about the people who perpetrated the suffering. It was about the consciousness of the culture. It was about the empire in which everyone lived. So one of the messages is that we have to live in the world, but not be of the world. And that's a very powerful way to go through a spiritual intervention, is you redefine yourself as a spiritual being having a human experience, and you depersonalize the wound by saying to yourself, it was never really about me, and there is nothing wrong with me. You have to end up forgiving the people who hurt you, but that doesn't mean hanging around the people who hurt you. It doesn't mean buying into a culture that reinforces competitiveness, hierarchy, domination, fear, control, and hurt, and abandonment. So the depersonalizing of the wound is one of the most important things to do. And the way to do that is to say, this wound is not me. This wound was external and was caused by someone or some beings or some culture. But it was never really about me, because I am a child of God, a child of the universe. I am lovable, loved, and loving. I always was. And there was a part of me that was never wounded, that God connected part of me, and I'm going to identify more with that part and say, that's who I am. So the definitions that the world provides, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm this age, I have this job, or whatever, aren't relevant. That you can use them, but that's not who you are, because you're more than that. You're a child of the universe. And part of you was never touched by human wounding. And this I call spiritual identification. The importance of spiritual identification is the transformation to oneness consciousness and seeing yourself as part of a larger connectedness of all of creation, of spirit, of everyone, of the earth, and really starting to identify yourself as a spiritual being who happens to have had a human experience. So in the process of this spiritual intervention and this redefinition of who you are, you then develop connection, compassion, and empathy for all beings. And that becomes your identity. And your meaning and purpose in life is that oneness consciousness. And you then serve others, and you become focused on being a channel for spirit. Now, being a channel for spirit means that you are so connected spiritually that no one can define you, no one can tell you who you are, and no one can tell you you're unworthy. So they may say things or do things, but they do not know the real you. Only you and spirit know the real you. And once you get to the point of losing yourself and your ego and being a channel for spirit, you then find ways to communicate the oneness consciousness and the lovability of all of creation, which means you become a steward of the earth. You care for those who are outcasts, those who are marginalized, those who are hurting, and you try to give them the love and care and support that they need in order for them to make their own spiritual transformation. So supporting the spiritual transformation of others is really very significant. We cheer others on. Cherished hearts empower everyone's resurrection. So the crucifixion or the fall is what happens with the woundedness after birth. And the resurrection is the reclaiming of your true inner being, your lovability, and your connection to spirit, your oneness with all of creation. And once you start living in that transformed way, you figure out ways to live in the world but not be of the world, which means that you become careful about who you're vulnerable with. You have selective vulnerability instead of total vulnerability. And you're also discerning in a careful way. You're strategic about it. So you are cautious about what you do, where you go, who you say what to, but you still find safe places to be totally, authentically who you are. And that's the juggling and the balancing part of being a mature, healthy, spiritually connected adult, is finding your people, finding your sense inside of your lovability, and knowing that that is the core of your essence. So what I wish you is healing, your healing journey, to come to your own spiritual transformation where you know your lovability, that you are loved and always were and always will be, and that with spirit working through you, it's not about you, but it is all about oneness in everyone. So it takes away the sting and the possibility that you will be wounded emotionally again, because you build a kind of armor around you, which is kind of like Teflon, where anybody who says anything negative, it bounces off you and bounces back to them. So I wish you well on your journey, and emotional transformation is important when people are wounded. This is not to negate that, but it is to say that sometimes it's helpful to have a spiritual transformation as well, where you really connect with your true essence. Thank you, and God bless you.